Welcome back, guys. It's Israel. Today I'm going to show you guys how to create a CI/CD pipeline that takes your Docker images and deploys them to your Azure web app automatically. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right in. But first, I just want to thank my channel members for their support. If you guys want to pop up here, as well as have access to whatever repos for my videos you want, click the join link in the description or the join button on my profile. But now, into the CI/CD pipeline. So now that we're at Visual Studio, right before I start actually working on everything that you need to do, I just kind of want to say that in this video, I'm going to try and do my best to simulate something that you would see kind of at your job. But what does that mean? Well, I'm going to have a dev and a master branch, as well as we're going to be using pull requests to trigger the release build, since that's obviously going to be more similar to what you're actually going to do in a work environment versus just having one branch and then just pushing it automatically directly to release, which is not really realistic. And I know there's a lot of videos on YouTube that do just something simplistic like that, but I actually want to focus and do something that looks more like what you would do at your job. Okay, guys, so this is the API I'm going to be using in the back, but first I would just show you guys how to add Docker in your Docker file in case you're starting with a new project. So what you would do is you would just select your project. So I'm just going to select this API. We're just going to call it whatever. You would click next. And then you would click enable Docker, and then you have the option for Docker OS of Windows and Linux. Honestly, I tried Windows. Linux is faster and just easier to use. Unless you have some type of restriction, I'd probably recommend Linux. So you click create, and when you click create, you won't really see changes. All you're going to see is now me going back to the API, is you're going to see this Docker file right here. And this Docker file will look something like this. With essentially, here is your downloading the base .NET 8 package, setting your work directory, you're exposing your kind of endpoints, then you set your SDK build, and then you basically copy your CS project file, you restore your NuGet packages, set your working directory, you do a .NET build now, and now you do like a release version build essentially here. And then you basically set the endpoint as your DLL. So that's essentially what's going on in this Docker file right here. And that's what will be created if you go through these steps, or if you go to your project and you click here, and then you go down to add, you can go add, and then you can do Docker support right here. And that'll bring up something like this, again, with your target OS, and then it will do exactly the same thing. So those are the two different ways that you could add Docker to your .NET API. So you've added your Docker file to this, and you added Docker, but you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to go to Azure yet. Well, if you want to test it locally, there's a few things that you need to do. First, you need to go and download Docker Desktop. So you're going to need this running. Next, at some point, it's going to ask you, do you want this for Linux or Windows containers? Well, depending on what you selected whenever you created your Docker file, select that one. So right now, mine is running with Linux containers. So it will make it, it'll only let you do one or the other. But once you have this running, and you need to have it running before you can do anything, you can then sort of go down to the command line, and you can do something like this. You can do a Docker build -t .NET 8 API YT. That's just going to be the name of the image, and then your path to the file. And then once you click enter and this runs, it should be able to go all the way through all of this stuff. It will go and download the SDKs, the .NET packages that it needs. It will copy, it'll go blah, 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 all the way down. And at the very end, it will create a Docker image. So then you should be able to go into your Docker desktop, and you should be able to see it right here. And that's how you know, boom, your Docker file works. You have Docker locally, right? And if you needed to test it locally, you now could. But now, obviously, we're working in Azure, so let's dive into Azure Repo and getting our project up there. So right before I push the project to Azure Repo, let me just show you guys what we have. It is a very simple API. And if you guys have watched some of my other videos for .NET 8 and stuff of that nature, so it has just 4 basic endpoints: get Pokemon, create Pokemon, edit Pokemon, and delete Pokemon. So nothing super fancy. That's all we're going to do. And really, this is what we want to see in Azure Web App at the very end whenever we do the release build. So let's go close this. Now we go to Azure Repo. So if we go to Azure Repo here, we see that we just have the Soccer Player API. That's from another video. So let's do a new project here. Let's call it .NET 8 API. And now let's just create it. And now what we're going to need to do once this project is created is that now we need to push all our code that we have here locally, and we need to push that to this project. So how am I going to push my code? Well, I personally use GitKraken. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to copy this right here. Okay, so using GitKraken, I was able to push my code to this dev branch in Azure Repo. So I should be able to refresh this. And I should be able to see that I have one dev branch here. So this dev branch contains all my changes in here, and I was able to push it up. So now we have all my code pushed into here. We can open it, see the files, and we have all this stuff here. So now that we have the dev branch, what we're going to need is also a master branch, because we want that dev to master. Dev is what we're going to work on. Master is going to be kind of our production environment per se. So we can call this one master, base it on dev, and then we can just create it. So now we're going to have two branches. If we check here, we should be able to see that we have now also a master branch. If we can refresh this, we should be able to see that we have a dev and a master as well. And dev and master are going to be at the same level because we based master off of dev. So now that we have our dev and master branch, what we need to do is we actually want to do the build pipeline, because we want to, whatever changes to our code happen, once we push that code, we want to trigger a new Docker image of the changes to our code. So we need a new version of that. And with that, we need a build pipeline. But to do that, we need to create a container registry first. So I'm going to go to my Azure portal. I have a resource group here, my Azure subscription. Next, we're going to go to container registries. Click on that, create it. Once we have this, obviously select a resource group. It can be called whatever it needs to be. I'm just going to be calling it Docker API YTCR for container registry, obviously. And then doesn't matter. I'm just going to do basic. We can review and create. And we can just create this, and I'll be right back once it's done. Okay, so my container registry has been created. So now the next thing that you're going to have to do is you need to go to access keys and click admin user, just so that we're able to access whatever repositories are in here. And then again, repositories are going to be in here. So once we actually do our Docker build, the pipeline will then throw it up into this container registry, and we should be able to see our new builds in here. But now the fun part, the CI/CD, let's go to that build pipeline. So to do that, we are now not going to be in the repo. We are going to go to pipelines. So now we're going to create our first pipeline. Create pipeline. We're going to do our repo git. We are going to select our project. And now out of here. So this is where the fun starts. This is the one you're supposed to click. This did not work for me. It gave me so many issues, from issues where it could not find my Docker file in the repo. And I banged my head against this desk right here trying to figure it out. And it just did not work. So with that being said, screw this one. But click it, and we're going to use some of the information from here. But I figured it out. So I'm doing this for you guys over there on the other side of this camera. So once you clicked on your subscription, it might ask you to sign in. Just go ahead and do that. Then you should be able to drop down to find the container registry you created. So it should be this one. We have our image name. It's just going to be .NET API. Let's see. 8YT. And then let's just have this right here. It's not really going to matter, but just bear with me. So what it's going to go and do is it's going to create the YAML for your actual build pipeline, but we're going to be changing it in a little bit because that little task that they have honestly doesn't work well. It's what made me bang my head against the desk. But there is a little bit of stuff in here that I actually do want to keep, and it's mainly this Docker registry service connection. It's basically the thing that's going to point us to the container registry and allow us access to actually push our images up there, and Azure to be like, okay, if you don't have that, it's going to be like, hey, you don't have the power level to push these builds. So I'm going to get rid of all this stuff because I'm not going to need it. And then we're going to be replacing this right now. With what? Well, let me show you with what. So click on the assistant, and then let's go Docker here. And we're going to need this. So this build or push Docker images, login or logout, start, stop containers. So what we're going to do here is the following. And let me move my camera just a little bit, just so you guys can see what I am doing. So container registry is just going to be the registry that we already have. Then we're going to have your container repository. This is essentially what just the name of the repo is going to be. So I'm going to do .NET 8 API CI/CD. And then we want to do build and push. we want to do the path to the Docker file. So that one's going to be good. And then in the build context, you don't want this. You're going to want system.default working directory. So you're going to need this here for your proper path to your context. And then for tags, essentially this is going to be kind of the tags as the build images are created. You can kind of keep track of what's the newest, blah, 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 blah. So the build ID is fine, but we also want to do latest, because latest is what we're going to be targeting whenever we are creating new versions to release to our release pipeline. So we're going to be really targeting this latest. So with that being said, I want to insert this in here. So this is the task we want to replace this one. For some reason, this just doesn't work. So we're going to take this, copy it, delete this, and let's paste this over there. And now let's just align everything correctly. And then as you see here, we have this container registry, which is just the name of this one. Well, I didn't delete this because what we're going to do is we want this in here. This will actually authorize us. Hey, if you want it to be a little bit more pretty, right? We could do this. We could grab this, go here and use our little variables to make our YAML file look a slightly bit prettier. So what we can do is we do this, and then we do this in here. So this actually allows us the ability to connect to our container registry without any issues. So now once I click save and run, this is automatically going to trigger a build with the current code that we have in our repo. And right here, let me point out before I forget, if you ended up doing Windows, which I hope you didn't because it was really annoying. If you did Linux, just make sure it says Ubuntu latest, or if you're doing Windows, Windows-latest. So make sure that this is correct. If not, you're going to get an error on that. But now that we have this, we should be able to save and run, and this will automatically trigger a build. So save and run. As we can see, we triggered a build with that code. So this should be able to find our Docker file, build the code that we have on our dev branch of our Azure repo, and then it should take that Docker image and put it in the repository in the container registry. Okay, guys, so our job has finished. So if we click in here, it was able to check everything out. Then our task that was called Docker. You can go through here and you can really see it going through the Docker file and how it executed. Go down here, you can see everything that happened, but essentially this means we're good. So as long as we got all green check marks, that means that now if I go to right here and I refresh our repositories, we should be able to see our repository here, and we should see that we have latest and the build ID. So we have two different builds. So the build with the build tag as well as latest. So build pipeline is done. So now the next step is going to be, can we add pull requests from dev to master? Because obviously that's like sort of the right way to do things. As well as on our master branch, let's now also do the release pipeline. But first, let's set up our branches with everything that we need to do pull requests. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually we want to set PRs on our dev to master branch. So we need to change a few little settings. So first, let me go to our branches here. We have our dev. What I want to do in here, go to branch policies. What we want to do here is, I believe, go here. We want to set this to deny. What we don't want is when we do a PR, we don't want our dev branch to even have the possibility of being deleted, because there is and it's happened and I've seen it, right? Where you do a PR to master branch and then it gives you the ability to delete the branch as if it was like a feature branch or something like that. But sometimes with dev, you just want to be continuously developing, branch off, push to master, and then continue on dev. So to make sure that you don't lose like your dev and what you're currently working on, click deny. And by doing this, it'll basically just kind of glaze out the button so that you don't need to like even have the possibility of making a mistake and actually deleting dev. It'll just not even be a problem. So that'll be done with this one. And then on master, what we want to do is we want to go to policies and we want a minimum number of reviewers. Essentially, that is for a PR, because we want to be able to only push to master if we have a PR, right? And that someone's reviewed it. So I'm going to set it to 1 because I'm the only one here. And if I didn't set it to 1, then who else is reviewing this, right? And then make sure to check this button so that you can allow yourself to approve your own changes in case you're doing PRs, so that you don't get stuck not being able to accept your own PRs, right? But first, I want to rename this so it has a better name because .NET 8 API is not what it is. So let's just do, let's just call this build pipeline. Give it a better name. Save it. So now this is our build pipeline. So now that we have the security and the policies to make sure that our dev branch is good and our master branch is going to need a PR, we now have our repo and our branches set up. So we need to go back to Azure because now we need to create the web app that we're actually going to be pushing to. So we're going to go home, create an app service, create a web app. And again, resource group. We can call it literally whatever we want, .NET 8 API YT. We have our Azure subscription. Instead of code, what we're going to do here is we're going to click container, Linux, because again, our Docker file is Linux. So we want to keep that in line. So again, pay attention. And then we can set whatever region, pricing plan. I'm just going to do free. Linux, that's fine. Let's go next to database. So if you had a database that connects to your API or your application, you would do that here. Next is container. So here we need to click Azure Container Registry because that's where we are pushing our Docker images. And then right here, it's going to bring up already our registry, the image that we have. So here, and then you can select the tag. So select latest so that every time there's a latest and you're not looking at build IDs, every time there's a latest, that's the one that we're going to be attaching to our container registry. So review and create, and I'll be right back when it's done. So my web app's done being created. So let's now check if at least that latest image that I already pushed from the build pipeline worked. So to do that, we can click here. And obviously this is an API that we're working with, so there's not going to be a pretty UI. But what we can do is, since I deactivated the only in dev Swagger UI, we can navigate to the Swagger UI so I can actually show you something changing. So let's just wait till this loads and then we can go to there. So as you guys can see, we are on the Swagger UI and we are in the Azure Web App. So we are in the Azure Web App right here. So this is all working good. So that latest build was successful. So we were able to, again, take our code, our Docker file, our Docker image, all that stuff, do the build pipeline, push it into our container registry, and now retrieve that into our web app. But now, obviously, the goal is to now, every time we push new code, we have a new build, and then that new build gets, after, you know, a review of a PR, gets now pushed to master branch so that we make sure that everything in the master production environment works perfectly and gets a nice review by, you know, your team if you were in the workplace, right? So we have the latest already up here, so that's good. We have our web app created, that's good. We have our branch policies all set up for PRs and for not deleting the dev branch. All that has been done and repeated. So now let's go ahead and do our pipeline, our last pipeline, our release pipeline. So I go here, new pipeline. We're gonna go to our Azure Repo Git, select the repository. Now out of here, there's not really one of these types of pipelines that works. So just do a starter pipeline and we can take away all this code. We can get rid of all of this because we're not going to use it. Obviously make sure that we are on master branch trigger because there's going to be a trigger on the master branch getting pushed. And then Ubuntu latest or Windows latest, depending on the OS that you're using. And then let's tab here. Then we're going to go to the show assistant. I'm going to type Azure. So we're going to do the Azure Web App. So we're going to do Azure Web App for containers. Let me move my camera so you guys can see. So it's going to be Azure Web App for containers. So we're going to click this one. You're going to click your Azure subscription. You may need to authorize or authenticate. Just click that. You should be good. App name is going to be the web app name. So .NET API YT is going to be this one, the web app that I created. You can do your deployment slots. So just for fun, I'll do resource group, which is the resource group that I have created in Azure. We're just going to do production because that's what we are, but you could have staging or whatever other environments you have. Now, image name. This is key. You need to go to your container registry, go to the repository where you pushed your build. You're going to click latest. And then here you have Docker pull and then the path to your repo. You want to copy the second part. That is the path to that image. And you're going to copy that and put it in here. You add it in. And boom, that's all we need for our release pipeline, guys. So we got another one. So I'm going to move my camera back. And then we are just going to save this in here. This is just going to get saved as a file. So we can save this in here right now. It's going to be saved right now to dev, and we still need to push this code to master. And what do we do when we push to dev? The camera's over here. When we push new stuff in dev and want to push to master, when we push code to master, what do? We do a PR. And what happens when we do a PR on master is we trigger the release pipeline. So let's go ahead and do that. So we go up here, we can see that we have our Azure Pipeline 1. This is the release pipeline. And then Azure Pipelines here, this is the build pipeline. So as you see, trigger on dev, trigger on master. And we still need to push this code to master. So when that happens, we'll actually go through that process. And if you go to pipelines, you should be able to go on all. Since the release pipeline hasn't run because we didn't actually do a PR yet, and that code's not on master, it's not going to run. But so you have that here, and then you have our build pipeline, which obviously has run every time we commit anything to the dev branch. So with that being said, now what we want to do is we actually want to do a PR to master. So to do that, you need to actually do a PR. So to do that, you're going to do pull request, new pull request. We want to set the dev into master. So obviously in here, what are the differences? Our two pipelines are not in master. And these are kind of some commits where I was tinkering around with these pipelines as filming this video. So we have a few commits, a few changes. Mainly it's the two pipelines that need to go into master because when we created master from dev, we did not have these pipelines in there. So to do that, we need to do a pull request. So once we do this, we need to do adding pipelines to master. And when we do this pull request, the release pipeline should run. So we can just create this. And now it needs someone to approve. The guy that's going to approve is going to be me. But you can set it to autocomplete. So you click this. And then you guys remember when we did branch policies and I said, don't delete set that thing to deny so that dev doesn't get deleted when you merge. That is right here. So again, glazed over, you can't touch it. So if you were to check this and you merged, dev branch would just be gone. Azure would just snip it away. But with that deny on that certain branch policy, you can't. So you won't make the mistake of dev just going away. But now what we want to do is set this to autocomplete. And now I'm going to approve it. So we've actually completed this. So now the pipeline has merged. So we've been able to get our code into master. So now we should be able to go to our pipelines. And we see that our release pipeline is actually being triggered. Why? Because we had a PR to our master. So with that being said, we should see that this is running. But you might run into this issue where you need to just give permission to your release pipeline. So you click view. You just allow it access to your Azure subscription. So you just click this and then permit. And with that, this pipeline should be able to run correctly. It should be able to grab latest from the container registry and then throw it up into your web app. So is it going to work? I'm not sure, but let's come back when this pipeline finishes running. And then we're going to go ahead and make changes to our API and make sure that we can push to dev, do a PR, and then push to master. But now that we have our code actually in master, we should be able to do all of these three things. So after you push your code, so now dev and master should have the pipelines in it. So now this should have this one correctly so that it's able to actually do the release pipeline. So now guys, let's actually go ahead and test to make sure that we can make changes to our local code, push to dev, do a PR, and then it goes all the way to master in Azure. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to our project. But right before I show you guys this pipeline working in Azure, if you found this video helpful, please drop a like on this video to help it spread on YouTube, as well as subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the other wonderful content I have for you guys. But now, let's test this thing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to our controller right here, and I'm just going to change this from get Pokemon to get Pokemons. Huge change, massive change, right? So what we're going to do is make sure that we are on dev branch. So let me switch over to dev branch here. So we checked out the dev branch. We're going to get Pokemon. Let me make sure that my local dev is also up to date. So we have our dev in Azure as well as, yep. So that should be good. So our dev right here is caught up to master in Azure. So with that being said, let's save this. So now our dev should be, it has one change. So it's going to be get Pokemons. So we're going to stage and we're going to push this. We're going to commit and we are going to push this to dev in Azure. So when I push this, it's going to push to dev in Azure right here. So immediately, what should we see? We should be able to go to our pipelines and we should see our build pipeline running. the get Pokemons change, which was a super detailed description right here for our change. And we should see it building, and I'll be right back once it's done. So we had our build pipeline complete. So if we go back to our repository, we should see that it has even another latest build at it's 123 right now. So we see this 122 right here and a latest at 122. So we do have a latest because of the build pipeline. So now the next thing is we need to do a pull request to take this latest Docker image and push it into our web app. So to do that, we go back here to repos. We're going to do a pull request, new pull request. We're going to do dev into master. So dev into master, we should see that we have one change. It's going to be that get Pokemons. So to do that, we're just going to do get Pokemons. We're going to create it. And then I'm going to set it to autocomplete. Again, can't delete dev, set autocomplete. And then I'm going to approve it. And it's now merging the pull request. And we should now be able to see that our release pipeline is going crazy. And by going crazy, I mean, it's just running. So release pipeline. And I'll be right back once it finishes executing. So as you guys can see, my release pipeline has finished executing. Also, whenever it builds or succeeds, you will get an email to whatever email is attached to your Azure DevOps. So that's nice to have. So everything in here was successful. So now we should be able to go to our web app and check and see that get Pokemons update. So we're going to click right here on our website. And again, it's an API, so there's not going to be a UI. But we will have the Swagger UI once we set that endpoint in the URL. So our Azure web app has opened, and now what we're going to do is we're going to set the Swagger UI. We're going to set that. And as you can see, we now have get Pokemons. Get Pokemons was the change that we made right here. So what did we do? We were able to make a change locally, push that into dev. In dev, we had the new build, which we saw latest get pushed up right here. When we went to our repository, so we saw in here, we were able to see this latest build in here. And then we took this build, we did a PR, and then the PR did the release pipeline and then sent that to Azure, and we were able to get that right here. So our CI/CD pipeline is complete. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about CI/CD pipelines, click this video right here. And if you want to learn more about microservices, click the one over there.